hath taken this counsel against Tyre, the crowning city, whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers are the honorable of the earth. The Lord of hosts hath purposed it to stain the pride of all glory, and to bring into contempt all the honorable of the...
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing the book of Isaiah, chapter 23, once again. Third time. Beginning with verse 10. We shift from, whatever. Okay. Yeah, well, the words we were just listening to are just exactly what we studied last time. The Lord has purposed it. Who has taken the counsel against Tyre, all the horrible thing, all the, all the bad things that would befall the city. The Lord has purposed it to stain the pride of all glory. I like that phrasing there. Pride. I almost see it like a big white T-shirt or a big clean. I mean, it's like, and you think about proud moments, how easily and precarious they are, how easily stained they can be. Because a lot of times when proud moments, sometimes you're protected. Like, for example, they win a war, they have a parade, and everybody comes by, and they all get in the parade, and it's not likely to go south. But, they say pride goeth before a fall. Actually, the Proverbs say that. Or actually, does the Apostle say that? Oh, whatever. But it's true that, one puts oneself in that position of, like, lifting oneself up, exposing oneself. That show of pride and glorying in it, of course, is very easily stained. It's precarious. I mean, I'm not saying that, like, that therefore the Lord is not some big deal or whatever, but the point is, people expose themselves like that. When you're glorying, you become vulnerable. People, when they glory and they get interrupted in some way, like someone takes the wind out of their sails, they get angry. Or they become belligerent. Whereas when people feel up about themselves or whatever, it's the being interrupted and brought back down to earth is always jarring. But anyways, there are things in the world that the earth honors, that God held in contempt. And the idea of much of what he does prophetically and stuff is to bring into contempt, to bring into the proper focus the things that are contemptible and the things that are praiseworthy. That's what a lot of times the purpose is, to either bring down the haughty, to stain the pride of their glory, and to bring into contempt that which the earth honors, but also to exalt that which is right. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun, or similar type of thing. That in the day of the Lord, when he comes to execute judgment, yes, there's purposes in bringing the wicked down, but he also intends to exalt the righteous. That's why the righteous are called to humble themselves in the sight of the Lord, that he should exalt us, that we could be exalted according to the truth, according to someone with a truly righteous perspective and objective standard. The thing, the earth honors and glories in the financial very often. Like the financial world, the blessings of having no need, no wants. I don't know needs, everyone's got needs. But nothing you lack. Pride, fullness of bread were the sins of Sodom. Abundance of idleness. And every abomination was found in her. But it starts with that. Once we stop struggling to survive and we just start struggling to, we get caught some people get caught in the trap of, like, I see it as like a trap. we struggle to survive. And some people take that to the ultimate, in which is they want to create the ultimate survival plan. So they lay up forever, as much as they, for as long, and sometimes you can't lay up too much because, meaning for your retirement and save up, you can't save up enough because your tastes, and plus maybe they know no bounds. I mean, you just got really expensive tastes. You want to live high on the hog. You want to travel. You want to do all these things. So you got to put a lot of money away for all that. So put their money away. And merchandise and making merchandise is all about that. I mean, people invest in the stock market. Nothing wrong with investing per se. But if we, if we look too much to the earth in terms of that, and planning for the future, socking away money, I don't know. Well, I can tell you this: it's not for me. I'm telling you that it's not for me. I just can't even imagine doing that, because I feel like after my needs are taken care of, there are other people who have not had their needs taken care of, and I have some sort of obligation to them. And it's not just like, it's like, so, and it'd be interesting to see. I've said to the Lord many times, I would be curious to have this problem. What do I do with my too much money? That would be an interesting problem to see if I could handle it better, or to see if I turn out to be just as big a jerk as everybody else. Meaning, I get it, and I start only thinking of myself and my future. I can't let go of the money. Well, I don't know about that. It's interesting. I don't know. The people in the poorest state in Mississippi routinely comes up as the biggest in charitable giving, which is interesting. And I don't know if that's because they have so many poor people, meaning more people are giving because of all the poor people. Because I don't know if that's really the case. Because when if you're looking at medium income or a median income, it's hard to tell what that represents. Because it's like you could have a very large proportion of rich people and poor people also and still get the same median income. So I don't know. But they come up often as the biggest givers in charitable giving. And you'd think it would be like the richest state would be the biggest per capita giver. And it's per capita, it's per person. It's not totals. It's per person as per, the population. And and it's this tendency when we get money to hold on to it more. I think that people who have less money in some ways are not used to having extra. And when they get a little, parting with it is something they're used to doing. I part with I never see my money for very long. I don't get too attached to it. I think that's almost like the thought. It's like I just don't get attached to it. I remember when we sold some puppies, and I looked at the cash, and I remember counting, and I'm like, wow, people must get it. I could see getting addicted to just counting out the money and just stacking it up and just seeing more and more money rolling in. I see how people get into that. It's a nice feeling. Whenever I had extra money, I felt a good feeling, a security, but it's a lie. You know what I mean? My security comes from God, and it'd be better for me if I had no money if I could learn that. See, a lot of times, the money thing is for some, I know we all need it, and, what we really need to do is work and trust the Lord, and be wise, and not wasteful with what he does give us. The merchant city, though, is a city completely consumed with this. Just like Mystery Babylon, she's completely consumed with the merchandise, completely consumed with herself. You know what I mean? The other purposes that these things serve, meaning that we need him, and that they're necessary, is not so important as the let us enrich ourselves. Let us, let's build a tower and wall that reaches into heaven, and that we shall have a name that should not be blotted out from the earth. People want to establish themselves. They want to lay up money in a big pile and then create something, or or have their retirement, or whatever. The funny thing is, like I said, it's like those people don't want to they don't want to die spending their last dime, which is ideal. Ideally you die as you spend your last dime, and then wait. Naked eye came into the world, and naked eye go out. I mean, the truth is, when you die, all your dimes get spent anyways, whether you like it or not. I mean, as far as they're all gone. He stretched out his hand over the sea. Pass through the land as a river, O daughter of Tarshish. There is no more strength. I think the immediately thing that occurs to me is wind your way through the land like a river, because that's how rivers move. Rivers do not move straight through the land, like never. I mean, there's some pretty straight rivers. The Nile is relatively straight, but it's not straight. You know what I mean? Like you see it on a map from space, and you're like, and the Mississippi is another one that goes straight, but it's not that straight. Mississippi is pretty straight relative to some, but I mean, not straight like a channel, like that someone dug. You know what I mean? So rivers tend to meander. I mean, overall, most rivers do. And so I think that's what it means. It's like, kind of wander through your land, O daughter of Tarshish. I mean, the one who, when it says daughter of Tarshish, it would be, I think it refers again to Tyre itself as being sort of the ships of Tarshish being this important part of who they are, and they being, the daughters, meaning the children of what comes from all that trade. Meaning there's this activity of going from Tyre to Tarshish, on a yearly basis, making round trips every 3 years, right? And maybe more than one set of ships. And then the Tarshish ships comes back, and they get all the merchandise. And everyone prospers from this influx, because it does tend to trickle down. I mean, people I remember people still act like the idea of supply side economics that was popularized in the 80s that they called trickle down economics. I mean, it's not, I'm not saying it's meant, people think that they're always looking for something to be some sort of solution to all mankind's problems, which it's not. All it means is that when the whole boat, it's like the idea that a rising tide raises all boats. Meaning, by the virtue of just living in America, whatever I happen to be doing, whatever my job is, if I'm a ditch digger, by living here, I'm actually living better than a ditch digger in another country, because by dint of the fact that a wealthier society just has everything better for me. It has, and that's not what trickle down really means, but I mean, in a sense, it's part of the truth that, wealthy people pay taxes that pay for services and other amenities that we all enjoy. I mean, we all enjoy this, and it's paid for from somewhere. And the point is, it's like, a lot of this stuff is paid for disproportionately by richer folks. And so, what was the point of bringing that up? The people in Tarshish also, it's like the ships coming back and forth. That has an effect that it's a nice city. And even a homeless person in Tyre is living in a nicer city than the homeless person down in whatever town down the coast that isn't a merchant city of great renown. And so also that it creates more available job opportunities in Tyre for people to be dock workers in a busy dock. A busy dock that's not only busy, but prosperous, because they're bringing trade goods from the other side of the world. And, and everybody does better. They do. I mean, maybe some more than others, of course. But if someone builds a factory down the road from me, it's like, it has an effect. I can benefit, not even just, I don't get a job there. Maybe my neighbor gets a job for there and he pays me his loan. Or whatever. Or he buys something for me. Maybe he hires me to build something for him, because now he has a job. So the economic activity from the thing is always true, that the economic activity of other people affects us. And usually provide. And the thing is, if it's a positive increase in economic activity, I mean, there's more money being made. The chances are the effect it's going to have is to make more opportunities for people to make more. There'll just be more opportunities because there's just more going on, more money. More activity equals more opportunities for people to take advantage of that and, and make some cash. But the city itself here, look around. It sort of gives you the sense of, take stock of the city, pass through thy land. Man, take your time, take a look. There's no more strength. If you really thoroughly assess it all, you'll see there's nothing there. He stretched out his hand over the sea. He shook the kingdom, speaking of the Lord. The Lord has given a commandment against the merchant city to destroy the strongholds thereof. And if you're tuning in from this study and not the other one, you should be mindful that the last study is an important connection to this one because we drew a lot of the comparisons to Mystery Babylon. In the book of Revelation, also, let's call merchant-haunted city, because the merchants of the earth are made rich by her, by reason of her costliness, because her rise causes this economic activity. For this, celebrations, it's just like anything. I mean, you don't allow certain things, it's like you don't get that. I was starting to think back to the pandemic. I really want to stop talking about pandemic. Not that I talk about it that much, but seriously. And he stretched out his hand over the sea and shook kingdoms. The Lord has given command. Okay, destroy the strongholds thereof. And he said, thou shalt no more rejoice, O thou oppressed virgin, daughter of Zion. Arise, pass over to Kittim. There also shalt thou have no rest. Kittim is the place from which it was revealed. And again, that does not necessarily mean that Kittim is somehow the one that does something to them, just that that's where the news comes from. That's what it sounds like to me. That the news comes from Kittim. And so they go over to Kittim. Like to be meaning, it's one of the places you might flee, obviously, because that's where the news came from. So there's some sort of allied city. I mean, that's a possibility. It could be the enemies, but I don't think so. But even among friends, they have no rest, if that's indeed what it means. Verse 13. And again, there also shalt thou have no rest. Oftentimes, the reason people save up for retirement and stuff is so that they can rest, retire, and be secure, and all these things. And the reason it's not good, at least for a Christian, is because we should seek security from God. Not that it's wrong to have your retirement and all that, but the point is, like, if you look to that, there are people who have way too much invested as far as in their hearts in that investment, in that money. I mean, they're just, in their hearts, way too invested in it, way too dependent on it, and not dependent on the Lord, not looking to God as the true author of our prosperity, and not looking to God as the true giver of rest. But instead, when they take away, look at their merchandise and their merchant city is destroyed. So what do they go to their friends, and this is a thing you see throughout, in the New Testament. An example of the parable of the what's the title of it? Oh, the unjust steward, who basically wasted his master's goods, and then his master heard about it, that he wasted his goods, and he quickly went to his pals, or he's quickly and made friends with all the master's debtors. He wrote down their debts so they owed less, and the thinking on his part was like, hey, when I get fired, these people all owe me, and I'll always have some place to go, essentially. They will receive me into everlasting habitations, which to me sounds like I'll always have a place to go. And Jesus said, yeah. Make to yourselves friends of the mammon of their unrighteousness. And so you always have some place to go. Yeah? And he meant that sarcastically, because the mammon of unrighteousness is not something to be friends with. We use money for whatever we need. It's not unwise to plan for the future. I wish I had some money for a rainy day. Not a ton. I don't think I would store up millions of dollars. I think that's unnecessary. I wouldn't know what to do, at least carnally, with $1 million. Well, $1 million, I wouldn't know what to do with it. But I mean, what I'm saying is, like, I don't have a lot of things I want to spend money on, personally. I mean, like, I'd like to obtain land so I could build for my children and stuff like that, but that's a different issue. So, like, yeah, that's a big thing I would like to buy. But, beyond that, I don't have a lot of things. I don't want a Corvette or something, like a car. I got cars. I'd be more interested in tools that I've seen that would make it, easier to fix the cars I got, or to fix future cars. I kind of like fixing cars, even though it's not my job. I like succeeding at fixing cars. You know what I mean? I like actually having it work. But I gotta say, as much as I say I like fixing cars, boy, I've never been angrier in my life, I think, than while working on a few certain cars. Now, verse 13 is a little weird. And I know that there's something up with this verse, okay? Behold the land of the Chaldeans. This people was not till the Assyrian founded it for them that dwell in the wilderness. They set up the towers thereof. They raised the palaces thereof. He brought it to ruin. So there's a couple things. First of all, the translation seems a bit awkward. Well, I remember in my Bible there's a note about this verse. So let's just look at it in the, instead of going to my companion Bible, which we don't all have, right? I have this, I picked this up. Many of you may have it, obviously. Whatever. In the future, more people will listen to this than the first few. This is the Bible I used to teach from. I don't teach the notes always, but I did used to refer to them frequently, okay? And it's got a lot of nice notes in it and stuff, It's called the Companion Bible. And I've used it for years, but not recently, as you all know, because we all have Google. And why not use something we all have? I shouldn't say Google. There are other search engines, but as much as I'd like to recommend them, but we're not using Google today anyways. But we all have internet and browser, obviously, because we're watching this study. So let's look at Bible Hub. That's what I use. Bible Hub, a more just tool. 13. Let's look at it in another translation. Just start off with the NIV, our thought for thought translation. Let's see what the translators think Isaiah was thinking. Up, cross over to Cyprus. Even there you will find no rest. So instead of, Tarshish, they translate Cyprus. See, that's a little bit much for me, because I thought I was not sure if it was Cyprus or they came every 3 years from Cyprus. That makes a lot of sense, scholars. Did you read in Kings? You know what I mean? Yeah, peacocks and apes from Cyprus. Sometimes I just don't get it. Like, how can you translate one part of the Bible without being familiar with the rest of it? You know what I mean? And being like, wait a second, we can't translate this Cyprus. Why not? Well, it doesn't make sense. I guess in Cyprus they have other ships that trade somewhere else. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. No, what's really annoying, that really annoys me. Oh, Cyprus is Kittim. Sorry. Well, maybe Cyprus is Kittim. Sorry, translators. I'm dumb. I didn't get the verses right. Okay, cross you over to Kittim. There you find the rest. All right. Tarshish. Okay, I was going to say Tarshish is not Cyprus. I was like, gee. But there goes my perfect reading skills once again. I was thinking it's funny because I did get a perfect score on my test for reading That doesn't mean I'm a perfect reader. That means I test it. I mean, if you force me to pay attention, I could do a pretty good job. Look at the line of the Babylonians. This people that is now of no account. The Assyrians have made it a place for desert creatures. They raised up their siege towers. They stripped its fortresses bare and turned it into ruin. Okay. During the period of the Assyrians, because remember, Babylon is an old kingdom. Goes back, there's the, the Babylonian Empire that takes Israel captive in some years hence, after the Assyrian captivity, and after the Assyrian Empire has fallen, the Babylonians, that's called the new Neo-Babylonian Empire. The Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar were Neo-Babylonians, the new Babylonians. It's not the old Babylonians, because like Hammurabi and all that stuff. That kingdom fell. And I think that's what this is talking about. Because at the time of this writing, when Isaiah is writing, the Babylonians were not a major power. You know what I mean? And I think this actually is a good translation because it fits with what I thought should be. Like there's some, and that's not really that bad from the King James either. Actually, it's pretty similar, I guess. Let me see. Let me bring up the text. People was not. Okay, was not. That's the thing. It's like this people. But I would have thought of that as being kind of like they weren't much of a people. I mean, not that they didn't exist. Well, that the city didn't exist as a power. But the idea of the Assyrians founding it for them that dwell in the wilderness, that's the verse that really sounds weird. Like the Assyrians set up a rest home for people that dwell in the wilderness. So they say no. They say, no. What it is when it says it made it as a place for them that dwell in the wilderness, he meant the animals. And that does make sense. The Assyrians made it a place for desert creatures. That's a good translation. Because I don't think it's a question of, you want to get the thought right. Because in the sense, if you say desert people, you say them that live in the desert versus desert creatures is a bit different, a little more specific, but probably the correct thing. They raised up their siege towers. They set up the towers thereof. Yeah. They raised the palaces. Raised and brought it to ruin. Yeah. And brought it to... So I guess that's the idea. It's like, it's not like... it's depicting a siege. They had built it, but the King James translators weren't sure where to transition. When you read the King James, and this will be pretty easy to explain here. When you read the King James, and... Sorry, here, let me get my study mode. Okay, that is right. No, that's right. And I love the little... Undo. This just goes forever. You see what I see on my left. But anyways, in the King James, you look at this, it seems like here's where it turns. They're building. The people were not till the Syrian founded it. He set up the towers. They raised the palaces, and he brought it to ruin. Right? But actually, what you're getting here is the people is more like right now they're not, because the Assyrian made it a place for wilderness animals to live, and they put towers against it. They raised towers. They raised up the palaces there. What do they translate? They stripped bare the fortresses. And now look at, if I go to the if I take this and say, okay, well, what does it actually say there? Just literally. Raised up the palaces. Yeah, raised up. I was worried that might be screw up the meaning, but they're right over in the NIV here, because it means to strip. They raised the towers. They raised up the palaces. I mean, they stripped the tower. So the internet, the INT. And here later on Isaiah, it's make you bare. Utterly broken. Now I say utterly broken, I think more stripped, raised. I thought of it like, if you think of this as raised with a Z, not raised with an S, like raised to the ground, that's more of the case here. Raised their palaces. If it said Z, then it would have made sense. Okay. And he brought it to ruin. Not God, the Assyrian. But you could say God too, through the Assyrians. You know, how ye ships of Tarshish, for your strength is laid waste. You know, all the strength of the sea, the strength of the trade, the strength of economic power, laid waste. It only has a limited power anyways. I've always told people always worry, like, well, Paul, what should I invest my money in? Well, first of all, I'm not an economic advisor, but I can advise spiritually. And I'll tell you, you know, the scriptures say, like we've talked about in Isaiah, that there'll be a time when they will cast their gold and their silver idols, it says, to the moles and the bats. And that's talking about idols, but the idols are made of gold and silver, and they're valuable. And the point is, they're now ashamed of these things, and they're hiding them. And believe me, you know, people will toss their Corvettes and their mansions aside to try and strip them, you know, to appear before God without them, without all their covetousness, without all their, you know, greediness laid bare. You know, they don't want that. They don't want to appear before God in that way. And they will throw those things away from themselves. Because in a true crisis, money is worthless. Once people realize you're in a crisis, like if you're in the type of crisis people are really afraid of, like I get these, all the time, these survival things on YouTube. And I've never been able to figure them out because it's like, one, I live in a rural area, so my survival place is right here. You know, this is all done with that in mind anyways, because I was like, okay, you know, where can I keep my family? And we'll be at least, we'll have our, you know, it's kind of like you got your ground staked out. Because here's the thing. It was like, I always see these things like, you know, they got their bug out bag and they got their fire starting knife and all that, and, you know, survival guide. And I think all these people in the suburbs are going to go live in the woods. Like, what woods? What woods? Like the I guess I'm from the Chicago area. There's no, like, where are y'all going? Out here? I don't think it's going to, I just don't, people are just going to wander out into the countryside for hundreds of miles? I don't think so. What are they going to do? Are people really going to bug out of the suburbs and just go, like, find, like what are you going to do? I'm just seeing these people, like, they jump in their car with their bag and their little fire starter knife. That's why the other day is like the guy was on the TV. He was selling some generator or some air, you know, some Patriot thing, right? And selling this stuff is like to be ready for that time. And he's got himself pictured in the woods. He's in the woods, and he's starting to fire. And I'm like, okay, what if you live in this city? You're gonna run to the woods and just live there for a while, I guess. I mean, here's the thing. There are scenarios where you need to do that, you know, where you need to just run to the forest and hide, but none of them are particularly good or likely survivable in the long term. You know what I mean? And it's like, I wonder how people are going to get to the wilderness that they think they're going to survive in and off of. You have to, you know, they're going to just all jump in their cars and drive for thousands of miles till they get to the actual wilderness. Because we don't even have any here. You'd just be sitting in the middle of a cornfield. There's no wilderness to survive off of. Where are they going to go out to the... I mean, if you live out in a wilderness area, you're going to be there already. I don't know. This part of me just thinks that a lot of it's silly. And the things that people value, you know, they'd be better setting up so that they could hunker down rather than bug out with a bag and you're just naked out in the world surviving. I mean, you'll survive, I suppose, if you know what you're doing. Once you get to the wilderness. I mean, I don't know. It surprises me. They're always like camping. Why aren't they doing the urban survival training? You know what I mean? Like if I was in the city, I'd be thinking, how do I survive here? Because the likelihood of getting out is really small. You're not going to get out. You're going to be stuck in your city. Just news for you. You ain't going to get out. there'll be cars just jamming the roadways, and then one of them will stall, and everyone's going to be... Look at every apocalyptic thing. It's just highways jammed with cars. Of course. That's what happens when people get out and start walking. It's like, and hopefully none of that stuff ever happens, but, it will eventually. Guaranteed eventually. Guaranteed. Eventually, it's inevitable. It's all inevitable. I don't know if a nuclear holocaust is inevitable, but someone's going to shoot a weapon. Yes. We're going to have some kind of nuclear war. That's inevitable. I don't know if it's going to be a world ender. It might be a world damager. It's funny with all the global warming that we do, And then it's like, they're worried about that, but we have the nuclear weapons. That's something to really worry about. One little nuclear, they're so busy fighting and hating each other that, like, they don't consider in the midst of all their fighting, they'll probably just wreck everything anyways. Well, the point of all that was about the, you plan up, because the thing is, in the end, money, once people are starving, food is the real commodity. That's the thing you really need, food. And the only thing that's going to trade for it is bullets. It's like, that's also valuable. Because you can defend yourself. I mean, bullets either given or given in trade or given in one-way trade. Because people will kill each other for things, like they do. And bullets, that's a valuable commodity. I wouldn't store up gold and silver. I'd be storing up lead. If I was worried about an apocalyptic scenario where it was bug outs and all that stuff and roving bands of looters and, people leaving the cities in droves and all that, I'd be most concerned about how much ammunition I had. I'm not, by the way. I'm not concerned about that stuff. I don't stockpile weapons, whatever. I'll say that, my enemies can know that. I don't care. I'm not unarmed, but it's like, I'm not like a big, that's a good thing for people to know. It's like, yeah, don't rob my house. You're not going to find like piles of valuable weapons and all that crap. I don't have that stuff. But, because I have a more powerful weapon in the Lord. I've never, even when they gave me, I remember before the stimulus came, I thought maybe I'll get a weapon because I always wanted a particular thing, but I didn't, because I bought tools instead because I'm a builder, not a destroyer, Well, sometimes things need to be destroyed, There's this concept in the prophets called the breaker. I was like the breaker. The one who comes up and breaks up the sheep. The breaker has come up before them. I like the idea of breaking things up. I want to perform that. I want to shake and break things up, shake it up. Christianity's, and it's interesting. We kind of lost a culture war, and I don't know what we're up to right now exactly, but it's interesting. So that verse seems cleared up. How, if your strength is laid waste, it has come to pass in that day that Tyre shall be forgotten 70 years, according to the days of one king. After the end of 70 years, so Tyre shall be the harlot. Well, how's that? I think that's simply, advertising. Or I think like the way like fishmongers or fruit sellers in traditional societies might go, yeah, fresh fish here, fresh fish. I don't know if in the ancient times prostitutes routinely said, I got your prostitution here cheap or whatever. I don't know. It sounds like it because, prostitutes, if they want to be in business, they got to talk. They got to make noise. Hey, sweetheart, how you doing? Would you like to have fun? So they try to attract people and get attention because, that's why they dress in provocative ways, and they walk around in public because they're trying to get people to talk to them and engage in a conversation about, like, hey, would you like to take me back to your place and give me some money? Quite frankly. And so the ships of Tarshish, their strength to bring, that back and forth, laid waste with Tyre gone. They have no place to come. And so the thing falls apart. In fact, I think after Alexander the Great, there's no more talks of Tarshish ships. There was a thing there for a while. From the time of Solomon, for a couple centuries, really, these Tarshish ships. It was a, economic staple of the times. But now, no more. It shall come to pass that Tyre shall be forgotten 70 years. For 70 years forgotten. According to the days of one king. Like for one generation almost. Because there are, people talk about generations. They want to know, how long is a generation? 40 years? 70 years? 120 years? It doesn't really, it depends. Sometimes there is a 70-year thing. There's a lot of 70-year things in prophecy also. But the generation question goes to something written in Mark 13 about this generation shall not pass, all these things will be fulfilled. But I'm not particularly, I think that's a weird place to hang your hat and say, like, okay, that's Israel taking Jerusalem in 1967, for example, or saying that that's Israel in 1948 declaring itself a state. I find that to be a sketchy interpretation, attempting to bring the modern times into the end times, like trying to, that's what they're trying to connect that, because there's a strong urge among Christian preachers for some reason to always like push that we are just about there narrative. We're just about there. We're just about there. I mean, because we've gotten closer, of course, than we used to be. I mean, like I've pointed out on a number of occasions, Jesus was born in like 4 BC and he was crucified sometime after his 30th birthday. We don't know exactly when. So it could be from 27 to 29 when he ascended into heaven. 27, 29 AD. If you minus 4 from 31. And then, because he had a ministry that lasted at least a year. Because he was about 30 years old, and then he began his ministry, and that was about a year, so he was about 31. So the earliest date would be 27. Though I have seen places where they said Jesus was born in 6 BC, or 3. And I've even seen 2, the most common ones I've seen is 2 and 4. 4 being the most common of the date of his birth, 4 BC. Well, that means 2027 would be 2,000 years since he left. That's interesting. And we are living in perilous times. So I would, my eyes are always open. I'm certainly not, I'm not anxious for any end to come in the next 5 years or to start in the next 5 or 6 years. I mean, God, 2027 could be the end, or it could be the beginning of the end, or it could be just the end of this age. Meaning that the civilization as we know it changes. I mean, it's already changed. It's changing, I should say. Like when I was a kid, things were different. I was living in a different world, and it's really changing. We'll see what happens, though. See, during times of change, anything can happen. It kind of makes me excited to live in a time of change because you have the opportunity to influence things. That's why I write music, to influence people. That's why I do Bible studies, to influence. It's funny they call it social influencing when people are on doing stuff. Fine. That's the point. Let's preaching the gospel. Influence people to follow Jesus. Singing as a harlot, like I said, I think it's just like, hey, baby, I'm back. I'm tired and I'm horny. I don't know. I'm tired and I'm horny. I don't know what, she's there. Tyre sings as a harlot. I mean, like, open for business. The prostitute, without shame. Why should she be ashamed? It's her job, and she's got to do it to stay alive. Whatever. I don't hate anybody. I've never seen a prostitute. I mean, I've seen one. I've seen them. I've never seen one. Never been with one. I've seen them, though. I've seen Kate. I remember one time seeing this young girl in this car with this old guy at the gas station. And I saw the way she was dressed. I'm like, she did not look happy. He looked like a scumbag. And I was like, but she looked she was clearly over 18. It wasn't like some, weird thing. And she was clearly there voluntarily because her door was wide open. She looked miserable, but there, And I've seen him on the street, or Not a lot. I've seen one time I was like, that's a prostitute, you know. That's about it. Twice, I think. But you know, they're not all, you know. But here's the thing: the cliche about a prostitute, like especially an old one or one who's been at it a while, is they're gonna be bold about it. Hey, honey, over here. Take a look here. You know, and that's the idea of Tyre singing as an harlot, is like, I'm back. You know, very, very, very ostentatiously returning. You know, take an harp, go about the city, thou harlot that has been forgotten. Make sweet melodies, sing many songs that thou mayest be remembered. Well, and also that's another thing, is they could sing literally to attract, right? I mean, I tell you what, it would be a lot more. It's not, you know, a prostitute going, hey, honey. It's not as appealing as one who's like singing, you know, something. I don't have a woman's attractive song. I'm like, Mary had a little lamb. Maybe not. That somehow seems wrong. For some reason, all of a sudden, when I sang that, I thought it was like suggestive. Like, that's because I'm a prostitute singing it. It sounds suggestive now. Mary had a little lamb. Maybe I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about Mary's little lamb. All right, let's talk about something else. So, you know, singing can be part of, you know, showing off talent. Plus, you know, prostitutes weren't always just wham bam, thank you, man. There's also, you know, they could be hired sometimes to entertain. Sometimes, here's the thing, sometimes entertainers were just prostitutes by dint of it comes with the territory. You come, you know an instrument, right? You play beautifully and you sing. It's like, and you're playing for lords and stuff, and they want to have sex with you. You know, and that's what happens. So entertainers often would be, that's the thing, is like the line between prostitute and entertainer, actor and prostitute and all that stuff is actually quite thin. And in fact, a lot of actors do quite literally prostitute themselves. As far as like, yeah, I never understood, like, when you go beyond just like Hollywood movies that are, you know, and I mean, you know, just without regard to R and all that stuff. But I mean, actual pornography is prostitution. I always thought, how'd they get away with this loophole? Because any man who wants to have a prostitute can do it legally. All he has to do is get a video camera. It's not meant to be like some enabling thing, but I understand. Just get a video camera and say, we're making a movie. I want to pay you as an actress to make a movie, and I'm the star. You know, I don't get the whole how that's legal. But like if you just do it without a camera, you've done something now that's illegal. I just don't understand why they allow the one and not the other. Like, they should be consistent is all. You know, actually, personally, I should say, I've always told people I lean libertarian, which means I believe there's a beautiful thing to the idea of liberty, and I admire it, though I'm also very pragmatic. I mean, I'm practical. I know that you can't just have a government that's just libertarian. And in fact, most libertarians don't think like that. The point is, it's just a philosophy that's saying we're going to like put a high value on individual liberty, a higher value on individual liberty than other virtues we might have in society, like, well, even above things like poverty. Individual liberty is actually more important than poverty because men's freedom, it can solve poverty if men are free. If men aren't free, we will have lots of poverty. If we say, well, we're making men unfree to fight poverty, they're lying. Because they may in some way connect the two, but they're not actually dependent on each other. I mean, as far as like, you're not going to improve one by making the other worse. They go together. So being a singer might mean you have to also act as a prostitute from time to time. You know, I have no doubt, because of the way it says here, you know, like, plus a prostitute could sing, could perhaps get more gigs. You know, you go to a party, you sing, maybe someone makes a proposition afterwards. You know, I don't know. This is just the way this business goes. It's a business, you know. Like I said, I have a lot of insight, so I always seem to know more about things than I ought to. Like I know I've been accused of having an almost criminal mind, but it's like I just can see into the criminal mind. I can certainly peer into that. It's not hard to empathize with even the wicked. That's the thing, is like I can empathize not just with people that are worthy of empathy, but even with the wicked I empathize. I know how they feel on some level. Like I'll get there, or I'll try to get there, because I want to understand. If I can understand those more wicked than myself, then I can understand myself. And then perhaps that's what the Lord wants me to obtain, so that I could obtain a greater gift from him. Because everything he's working with me is not just passive. I mean, God, whatever he sends me, whatever he's doing, is meant to have an effect on me, to bring me to a certain place, to change me, to help me grow. And that's what it's there for. It's not just for no purpose, to just so we can be a certain way. All right, shall come to pass after the end of 70 years that the Lord will visit Tyre, and she shall turn to her hire, and shall commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth. And then again, I want to just to make it clear, in case you're not familiar. I mean, I can't imagine someone studying with me in Isaiah before they study with me in Revelation. Most people, when they study with me, they do one of two things. They go straight to Revelation or straight to Matthew. And they're both good choices, because I think I did a good job teaching both, especially Matthew. I seem to be getting... I'll tell you what, I haven't seen it in a while. It's been years since I did it. Well, a couple of years, right? I think I did that study at least 2 years ago. But it's cool. I've been doing this for almost 3 years now, on an almost daily basis. But he said... sorry, I got the tiny Paul up there. But but there've been a lot of nice compliments paid to the Matthew study. That's good. Well, good. It's blessing people, and I hope they could bless a wide array of people, because I'm always a little cognizant of the fact that my doctrines could offend certain people. Not all of them. I have certain doctrines, like my disbelief in eternal torment as the literal interpretation of hell. Like I say, no. Death, because most people, most Christians in the mainstream, believe that the literal interpretation of hell is a place of eternal torment, and that the figurative, the metaphorical of the interpretation of hell is a second death. I reverse that completely and say, no. The literal interpretation of the lake of fire and hell is, the literal interpretation is the second death. It is a second death. That is what it literally is. And the idea of torment and all that is a metaphorical construction about the nature of what's going on in hell. And also what's going on beyond hell, because a lot of what it has to do with is how the world goes forward without them afterwards. And so, and without getting into a lengthy explanation about it, it is a subject we are going to tackle at some point at length, like in a multi-week probably project. And I'm gonna see how I can line this up, that perhaps I can do it completely without planning, which would be my preferred way to do it. And because you know what, it's almost fun that way. I love doing things without planning, because sometimes the Spirit of God is so good to me, as far as like the way I get away with. I prayed to the Lord the other week about my financial situation. I just wanted to not worry about it. That was my main concern. Not change my financial situation, because there's nothing wrong with my financial situation. But I was finding it was bugging me, and I was worried about it. And so I prayed about it, and I'm not worried about it. I've gotten peace concerning that. But still, I'm going to bring it up. The financial. I'll come back to that if I remember. Let's go back to Revelation. The reason I brought this up is I want to go here. But I know why I got that. Because I said you should have listened to... Most people will have listened to Revelation. Their money got into it. Probably because of the other thing. Revelation 17 and 18 is Mystery Babylon. Or Mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the world. A mysterious name is actually, when I sing it, I go, upon her forehead was written a mysterious name. That's actually what's there. Babylon the Great, the mother, mother of harlots and abominations of the world. And let me tell you, I mean, can't you see the connection back to Isaiah 23? That this is just like absolutely tied in. She's a harlot, merchant city, you know. And also look at this. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And what did it say? Oh, the Tyre would sing as an harlot. And then after 70 years, I missed the wrong. Going about singing many songs to be remembered, and then it says what? After the end of 70 years, that the Lord will visit Tyre, she shall turn to her hire, meaning the hire of a harlot, to her work of whoredom, and shall commit fornication. Notice the fornication factor in both. So that we see a very clear connection. That's why when people say that Revelation is all about the Romans, I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? It's all about the Romans fit in, but it's also about the Americans and the Russians. It's about every nation under the world whenever they commit the same kinds of things. And there is an ultimate fulfillment of that. I certainly believe that Revelation has an ultimate fulfillment in Antichrist and the return of Jesus, of course. But it also has, it does have all prophecy and all the Gospels, and it's all given not for any one particular moment. And this is something that I don't have to establish. This is not my doctrine. You know what I mean? That's why I just oppose amillennialism, because in a lot of other things I see in the church, like the cessation of spiritual gifts and all that kind of stuff, because it's not based on actual anything except their lack of having a spiritual growth experience, contact with God, dead prayer life, whatever it is. They completely have no supernatural divine interactions going on. And so they interpret the world from their like desiccated materialistic point of view, as if, but at the same time still maintaining this sort of Christian facade. You know, there's no actual belief because they don't think anything applies to anything. The prophecies were all for the past. Revelation is all about the Roman Empire. It's all, what is it, preterist. Or no, preterist, futurist. I'm a futurist. So it's preterist. It's all part of the past. That's a preterist view. Preterist view is false. 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 This proves it. Because Mystery Babylon is not about the Romans. It's about Tyre. Or is it? See, it's about Tyre, and Tyre is about Babylon. And notice Babylon was mentioned in Tyre here. And they're all about something else. They're all examples of something even bigger. So Mystery Babylon is just the label of this thing that's been put on, this image of this whorish woman riding on the world. You know what I mean? Riding it and also being wedded to the Antichrist and committing fornication. And being, you know what I mean, so she is a great whore. You know, that whole analogy. That is not Rome. I mean, it is Rome, but it's not exclusively Rome. You can't say that's exclusively for Rome. The things written in Revelation 17 and 18 were also like, you could look back at Tyre and say, yeah, that's a lot like Tyre. Because you know why? The prophecies in Isaiah 23 had all the same basic prophetic pieces. Same pieces. How do you have the same damn pieces in a puzzle and not get the same picture? Well, you don't. You get the same picture every time if you got the same pieces. That's what I'm saying. It's just one picture. There's one picture, one prophecy. And it just applies to everything. Because when you get the right circumstances, it always turns out the same. Duh. You know what I mean? It's like, don't you know, if you do the same thing You know, if I do the same exact steps, I'm going to get the same results. If I take 5 ounces of this chemical and 6 ounces of that chemical and 1 ounce of that and I mix them all together, I'm going to get the same thing every time. Prophecy, same thing. Same thing. You know, you start marking people and telling them that, you know, making second-class citizens out of people that don't go along. You know, you start doing these things, it starts looking like the mark of the beast. Starts looking like the mark of the beast because you are fitting yourself into it. Tyre is fitting itself into the image of Babylon. It's not that there's 2 prophecies concerning Babylon, concerning the great whores of the world. There's not 2 prophecies concerning the great whores. There's only 1 prophecy concerning great whores. And it's all the same. It all applies equally to every great whore that ever could be. Now, about things like 70 years and stuff, I mean the basics. I'm not talking about the time. There are obviously things that are but when I said like the preterist view is just false, why? Well, I got to justify that. I can't just leave that out there because there are so many preterists and they're probably screaming at me. But it's false because of the very fact of just look at Tyre. Yeah, or no, I'm sorry, not Tyre. But look at Isaiah. I mean, we've covered it. When it says a virgin shall conceive, he was talking about someone in his time, much as people think that the book of Revelation is all about the Romans because it was in the time that it was written. They were the power. And so it's an obvious thing. It's like, well, maybe he was looking at that big, powerful nation that's running everything right there, that world government. Maybe he wasn't looking to the future. And it's a logical thing to do. Why don't we look at the Romans? And they say, wow, I see ways you could interpret this of Rome. But I'm like, I'll tell you what, I'll tell you what, trying to make Rome fit into Revelation is so, it's like you don't, it's all just really, I mean, I've read Revelation dozens of times, hundreds of times, actually. I've sung it hundreds of times, read it just as many. You know, I've probably sung it 1,000 times, right? And just, there is not an obvious, like, just one thing. I mean, obviously the end times, but it was like, I don't know. It's like I said, you look at that passage, it has a lot more to do with Tyre than it does to do with Rome. Like when I think about Rome and I read Revelation, the Roman Empire, I'm like, what do they mean? They say, I see a lot of connections between this and Rome. I'm like, really? Like what? Like what? Specifically, they always say here's what I always hear from these people. I read their papers. They say, there's a lot of obvious hints at Rome. Name one. Seriously, the 7 hills thing, that's all I know. The 7 heads which thou sawest are the 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Oh, are 7 mountains, 7 hills of Rome. Well, there's one. Next. The beast, maybe 7 heads, 10 horns, the 10 Praetorian guards. I don't know. I don't know what they're saying because they don't say. That was the thing that annoyed me. I recently looked at an article and it just said there are lots of things in Revelation. Just, oh, you know them, of course. That's what I hate. It's like, like I said, when I say preterism is wrong, I got to say something about it. It's because a virgin shall conceive. Right there. In the New Testament, they said that applies to Jesus. In the Old Testament, it was obviously just about Ahaz and his wife. That they were going to have a child, so that the king line he wouldn't be the last king of Israel or the last king of Judah of the line of David. That's important. That a son would be born, that the government could be upon his shoulder. And then all of a sudden he says these things that go beyond, right? Oh, well, that doesn't sound like Ahaz's. That doesn't sound like Hezekiah. It sounds more like Messiah. Yeah, because it is about Messiah. Just like Revelation, it's like, yeah, well, it kind of sounds like the Romans, but it's not about the Romans. It's about the return of Christ. It's about the end times. It is futurist. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a preterist element, meaning you're looking at something also that's a snapshot of the past. Because to say that Rome had no influence on the New Testament writers is insane. And to say that it wasn't, that it wouldn't impact anything is insane. But to pretend like The stuff in Revelation was just all derived from looking at Rome and trying to make symbols that fit with Rome is bull. Chapter 17 was not taken from Rome. Chapter 17 in Revelation, you look at the burden of Tyre. It's obvious where they're getting this from. They're not getting it from looking at Rome. They're getting it from looking at the Old Testament. That's where the book of Revelation comes from. It comes from the Old Testament, not from guys standing around looking at the Roman Empire and trying to figure out how to fit it into symbology. There's hardly anything in Revelation you can't pick up on in the Old Testament. Hardly anything. There's one major theme in the book of Revelation that isn't found elsewhere in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, especially in the prophets. The major themes of Revelation are not new. And they were not strictly, and the idea that they would take all these Old Testament things and it was just all brought to bear just for the new, just for secretly talking about Rome. I just find it so lazy that they continue on that. And then they don't, like I said, I don't see a lot of actual robust argumentation. I'm sure there is out there somewhere. I haven't exactly looked. And so, when I say this, consider it's all one-sided here. I'm just giving you my feelings about something. And it's not, oh, okay, we're all done. It's not the same as the thing, whatever. So let's see, where are we in this chapter? Oh, that's the last verse. So let's look at the last verse. So after it shall come to pass at the end of 70 years that the Lord will visit Tyre, she shall turn to her hire. Because visit often means like visit to check up on, like to judge. Like I'm going to come back and visit. And the day of visitation is sort of like the idea that God lets things go on and he doesn't interfere, right? He doesn't, like, I may have a problem. He just lets it go. Well, let's say he wants to change that somewhere. But then there comes a day when he visits me. And it's not necessarily he comes personally. It could be just, like, let's say I drink and drive, right? And then God lets me get away with it for a while. But then one day he decides he's not going to let me get away with it. And then I get an accident or I get pulled over. I get a ticket, get a DUI, right? And now that's the day of visitation. Maybe it may not feel precisely. I may not personally realize that God's doing it to me. But it's like the day of visitation when your sins come to the full and when they get exposed or when they get whatever, it's like that's all part of it. It's not pleasant, but it's also part of what it truly means to be a Christian because we want God to visit us. We want him to come and check up on us and make adjustments. I want him to say, Paul, I want you to change. I trust in him for my salvation. I never doubt that. But what I sometimes doubt is if what I'm doing now is what I'm supposed to be doing, and if what I have is sufficient to do what I want to do. And I'll tell you what he wants me to do, I should say, because what I want to do is what God wants me to do. I want to find that at least, and then do it. I don't have to mention any more about that. Okay, she'll commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world. What that means is through interactions with them, and committing fornication again. Yeah, I didn't spiritually in the book of Revelation. God, I gotta do this quick because we're gonna finish this chapter. The great whore, she is a portrait of an apostate church that should have kept faithful to Christ. That should have been waiting for Christ, but instead, when the Antichrist appears, these people who are probably not dedicated Christians, but probably many of them going to church anyways, but they are the great falling away. Because I don't see any real believers actually falling away. I just don't see how that's possible. Except for, there are exceptions like Judas. I mean, there are exceptions, but for the most part, since we have so many nominal Christians, it seems to me that they're the ones who are going to fall away. There are so many of them, and it's going to be so easy. I go out in society, like the whole, just this thing with the pandemic, I'm going to mention it, but it's like, it was just, everyone went along with it, and I know most of them are good Christian folk. I'm walking around in a store with 99% of the people wearing masks, 9 months into a pandemic that's bullshit. And then, and I'm walking around, I'm seeing they're all wearing them, and I know these are all good Christian folks. A lot of them don't want to wear the mask, they're just doing it anyways. So what's going to happen when the mark of the beast comes? And they don't want to take the mark of the beast, but they don't want to get in trouble either. And maybe it's not the mark of the beast, they'll tell themselves. Or actually what they'll really tell themselves is nobody's going to believe that they're worshiping Satan, let me tell you that. All right, but the great whore represents this apostate movement. And the whorishness comes from the idea that they're waiting for Christ, and it's like a wedding. There's going to be a marriage supper of the Lamb. There's this union between his church and himself, this reunion in a sense, but it's also a union like we've never met him either. So it's like a bride meeting their husband for the first time. Because in truth, in all the times he walked on the earth, he may have known men, but he never knew the church. And certainly not as a whole, not as a man. And so he's coming to take a bride, coming to look for a chaste virgin. In fact, the Apostle Paul said, I would that you could bear with me, brethren, in my foolishness, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to get that. But I want to present you as chaste virgins to Christ, he said in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 or 10. Just around there, 2 Corinthians. He says, I want to present you as chaste virgins to Christ. You know, chaste virgins. And that means people who have been faithful. And the way in which you're not faithful is by worshiping other gods in whatever form that takes. You know, because worship is not always just like, I worship you. It can be a certain level of dedication and service. You know, like you can't serve two masters. You can't serve God and mammon. Mammon, you know, being like, again, like the thing we've been talking about, this prosperity thing. It's like, I serve prosperity. I'm going to serve money. Can't do both. And that's why people, so I tell people, I'm like, I don't believe in your philosophy. I can't serve mammon. You know what I mean? Because I serve God. It'd be impossible for me to, like, there are times in my life where I feel like, you know, I wish I was just working a job. Any job. Or I'd been working and just bringing home a paycheck. Because God, I've got my expenses so low. When I started this family, I was trying to keep expenses down. I've kept them down. They're low. I don't hardly need any money. You know what I mean? But because I live a life that's dedicated to God's service and that puts that ahead of things, you know, it makes it hard anyways. Like I'm living a life that's as stressful as someone who's trying to make millions of dollars. Because imagine trying to make enough money to live without hardly trying. Yeah, I mean, that in itself is hard. Meaning you're only allowing yourself, you're basically putting all your best and most strong efforts, you're setting all that aside for God. That's what I've done. I've set aside and it's not just this Bible study. Gosh, this is easy. But the hard part is going to sleep early and getting up early. I'll tell you that part. Right? I want to serve God. Well, the point is I can't. I have to serve him. If I serve money, I won't be able to serve God properly. Not the way I promised. You know, when I promised God, I thought I'd be going to the priesthood. And I do require that level of dedication. As far as my gifts require that level of dedication. There's a sort of almost priest-like dedication that is required to certain gifts. Because they need to be worked. You know what I mean? I've got a lot of music to do. No, and I always feel, and the thing is, I always feel behind on the Lord's work. So how am I going to start worrying about the world's work? If I'm behind on the work of God, you know, how am I supposed to keep up with the world? And I can't. And so I don't. And the Lord make up the rest. You know, the Lord take care of me. And he always has. I don't have any problems with money. I just got occasional problems with faith. You know, I doubt. I don't doubt God, but I sort of doubt what's going on. You know. Or I get, not so much doubt. Like, the thing is, I don't know what's happening. But I should trust, even if things I fear happen, it's going to be for the best. Even if there's things that I'm fearing are going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, let's say I was afraid my house was going to get foreclosed on. I'm not, but I used to be. You know, I used to have those problems. I used to have, I remember getting a foreclosure notice like 10 years ago. You know, and dealing with that. And, you can be afraid, but my point is like we do what we can. We do what we are able to do, what God has given into our hands to be able to do, to work with our hands or whatever. we do it. And if in whatever missions he's given us to do in the ministry, we do it. And it was on, the main point of all that was really on the tip of my tongue, but let's just finish up. Well, if we do the things God asks us to do, we'll please him. If we don't, we won't, right? But we trust in his salvation anyways. And so, whatever I'm doing that may be displeasing to God, whatever, it's like, I'm not worried that I'm going to ruin everything or whatever. If I lost my house, it would be the best thing that ever happened to me, no doubt, because it would be what God wanted. So I'm not going to live in fear of things happening that I don't want to happen. I don't want to lose my house. I don't think it's time to move. And you know what? I'm not trusted if I had to move. Wow, it's the perfect time. You know what I mean? If I had to do something like that, it would be just the right time to do it. I have to be able to trust that. I have to be able to look at the things I fear and say, if that fear came, I shouldn't be afraid or preoccupied about that fear. Because one, it's unlikely. Two, if it came, I just have to trust the Lord. And even if it is likely, well, then all the more I can be ready to trust the Lord right now, because I'm very likely going to experience whatever it is I'm afraid of. And do that. Trust him in the midst of those things. Don't always trust him to not let it happen. I'm not going to say, God, I trust you to never let me lose my home. It's like, I don't know, he might let me lose my home if I mismanage it. There's a lot of reasons why he might let me lose things. Might let me suffer things. Might let me do things to myself to hurt myself or to screw things up. I know he will do that because he's done it. He's let me go astray at times. But he was always there to bring me back. So that's good. So then her merchandise and her hire shall be holiness to the Lord. It means sanctified. Usually it means like actually to be destroyed or something. But here it is, it shall not be treasured nor laid up. For her merchandise shall be for them that dwell before the Lord, to eat sufficiently and for durable clothing. Again, notice he isn't into piling up money. It's for using stuff, for eating and clothing. Like Paul said, having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. You think he might have been remembering things written in Isaiah similar to that? Because that's exactly what that's same sentiment. Her merchandise, because the thing is, she's gonna the thing is you look at Babylon in the book of Revelation, she burns, she's punished, but everything that she has, still all the merchandise and all the riches is no more in her. It says that over and over again. It shall be found no more in all the merchandise of gold and of silver and of precious stones and all the things that you had in you, they'll be found no more in you. The voice of the bridegroom, the voice of the bride. All those things. None of that will be heard in you. All the joyous noises of human activity that used to be in the city, gone. Instead, but the stuff is still there. And the stuff is taken away. They can throw the gold to the moles and the bats, but God will find it again and melt it down into streets for his great city. I'm just saying that that's not a literal truth as far as he takes that gold and melts it to the streets. But the streets have the foundations of the city are made of precious stones. The streets are like pure gold, as it were, transparent glass. So it's some sort of material we're not familiar with because we don't have transparent gold yet. Not that I'm aware of. I'm not even sure what that means. It says it was like gold and transparent. So, Yeah. So the merchandise holiness will be separated. The merchandise that is taken from her then shall go to those who need it most. To those who dwell before the Lord. To those who have not been the objects of God's wrath, but rather whom he wishes to bless. And who are content with such things as food and clothing. Sometimes that's all we need. If we're fed and clothed, and remember in the Middle East, you don't even need a house for a lot. You can dwell in a tent, or even a lot of times people just sleep outside in some places. Housing is not as important as other things, as food and clothing. Like being homeless is not as bad as being naked. Right? I think it's obvious. All right, that's good. We're finished with chapter 23. Look forward to starting chapter 24 tomorrow. Thanks for joining this study. Look forward to being back again.
Pass ye over
to Tarshish.
O ye inhabitants of the isle, is this your joyous city, whose antiquity is of ancient days? Her own feet shall carry her afar off to sojourn. Who hath taken this counsel against Tyre, the crowning city, whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers are the honorable